Alright, it's getting ready for brazing time, but first a little fire safety and a little protection prior to getting in there. There's a lot of guys who won't go through this because they're so good they don't need fire protection. And well, I'm not that good. I like to have fire protection. So one of my things that I do, and especially to save the valves, I always hear about these guys having these leaky valves. They're always either having leaking valves or bad expansion valves. But you'll usually notice they're the guys who don't go through that extra measure of protection of their valves from heat. So I have the wet rag on here, which is around the valve itself. Since this is a large diameter pipe and it's going to get really hot and want to transfer a lot of heat up, I go the extra measure and I actually put a extra damp rag right around the copper pipe too, because you don't want that heat to transfer up to your valve here. Another thing I do, your wires. You have all these wires. Figure out how big your flame tip is going to be when you're going. How far, if you made a mistake or an accident or somebody called you and you're distracted, how far can your tip, when you bend it, your tip can go to, say, up here. So I put a wet rag here, here. Back here I have some wires and sensors behind here. And the tip of your flame, even though your flame stops, the hot air that's several hundred degrees is carried behind it, rolls several more inches, and it goes up. And so if you have sensors or wires up higher, like up in here, you see I have one of the thermal blankets. This is one of those black fiberglass thermal blankets right here that you see. I have it stuffed several inches going back behind. So even the hot air that if I was brazing, if I had my heat recovery mode and I was brazing this big one here, that takes a big hot tip. The hot air will go through that hole right back here, and right behind here there's some wires and sensors off to this side and back here. Sometimes guys will burn that stuff, and last thing you want to do is tell your boss or the owner you burned some wires and you need one of the guys to do a repair for you or something like that, or possibly have to buy a harness or a little tiny fire. We all know fires can happen, but if you take enough precautions, like my grandfather and father used to say to me, if you take enough precautions and do it right, you will never have a fire your whole entire life. So I wet everything down. So even though I have it, everything is wet prior to me just starting. I wet everything down, you know, wet the paper down here, my side paper here, all this gets wet just prior to me starting. Have my fire extinguisher, have a bucket of water, plus I have the pump spray. I know that's might be a little ludicrous, and some guys will say, oh, that's just overkill, but you rather be that one guy who said I never have the fire than be that one guy, wow, there was that one time it was so embarrassing I burnt down a building. And especially after you braze and your hot little balls, beads fall down, and they fall down through one of the holes here, holes down here, and they fall back down underneath, and they sit on top of this this tar. This is flammable. That piece of wood is flammable. If a BB falls down right up here and just rests right there and starts burning into the wood, and if you're in a place where it's 90, 100 degrees, you're only 17%, 20% humidity, that's a dry piece of wood, it could start a little ember, an ember that can glow and burn. You finish your whole job, you take down everything, you come down off the roof, you close the hatch, and 8 hours later, when everybody's home and away that night, with the little pick up the winds, a roof fire can start. Or even worse yet, if you were carrying your pipes down through the wall, through the ceiling, you have the opening and you're brazing up here, and your little red hot BBs of brazing rod fall a story or two down and go on something underneath. You have to have that area down there prepped for fire and prepped for just in case. I can't stress enough fire safety. Here in San Francisco, we had some really major roof fires and complete building losses from welders, guys brazing, guys welding, and the fires happened many hours after they left the job site and everyone was gone. Another thing I do is I wet down my entire surface area around where I work. The wood, even back underneath the unit, it all gets, that whole area underneath this unit is completely wet. It is only 1 in 1,000 chance, but you don't want to be that lotto winner who causes that fire. That's about all I have to say about that, and it's about time to start. Oh, nitrogen. Got the nitrogen flowing. As I do one at a time, I'll have the nitrogen flowing constantly this whole entire job up here, and then going downstairs to all the units, my nitrogen will stay flowing. At the end of this run, there's 2 6-tons and 2 8-ton air handlers on this system, and they're going through Y branches, distributor branches. And at the very furthest unit, I have my rubber plug out, and I can feel the nitrogen flow out really gently and softly. You put it like on your face where it's really, your hand usually can't feel it. You don't have a really high flow, but it's enough that you could just barely feel it. So at my furthest point, and I'll continue this braze all the way down, and I'll follow this out, and it literally goes back about 30 feet back that way. And as I'm going, the nitrogen is continuously flowing out my branch from pipe to pipe to each branch, and then I plug them off all the way to get to the very furthest unit that's down over here. And then when I'm all finished, I'll put a plug in the end, and my whole pipe will be filled with nitrogen, slightly pressurizing, because I have the unit on over there. And actually you can kind of see the little ball in there. It's flowing right now. You can see it suspended, so it's flowing as I'm talking. And this piping system, once I start brazing, will never see the light of day of any atmospheric air in it, as I chase the nitrogen with heat and brazing all the way down to the very furthest tip, and then they get plugged. So once you start this, you nearly helped pre-dry your entire system, and you sealed it up immediately after you finish. Well, let's get some flame going here and start melting stuff. Fun time.